Yellowstone, wild beauty at first sight, but here silence can mean something else. People enter and never return, bodies never found, cars abandoned, keys still in the ignition, notes scribbled in haste atop mountain peaks. Some fall into icy waters and vanish. Others disappear without a trace, no explanation. Only emptiness. 6 stories show that in this park, the unknown is as real as the landscape itself. So put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and hide well beneath the covers, because now, the mystery begins. Let's go. The disappearance of Daniel Lynn Campbell, the dog gone case. Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, April 8, 1991. It was early spring when 42-year-old Daniel Lynn Campbell left Big Timber, Montana, heading for Yellowstone National Park. A man accustomed to isolation, an experienced hunter, and deeply familiar with the area. On the morning of April 4th, 1991, an acquaintance dropped him off at the Hell-Roaring Creek Trail, accompanied only by his loyal Australian shepherd. The mission was simple, to look for elk antlers that naturally fall at the end of winter. Nothing Daniel had not done dozens of times before. 4 days later, he was officially missing. No tracks, no traces, only silence and the vastness of one of the park's most hostile landscapes. Hell-Roaring Creek is a treacherous area, deep valleys, uneven terrain, sudden weather changes, and the constant presence of predators such as bears and wolves. Search teams launched a massive operation. Helicopters scanned the region, crews walked every trail, and tracking dogs followed scents that vanished abruptly. Nothing. The absence of any personal belongings, backpack, clothing, tools, was what most puzzled investigators. If he had suffered an accident, something should have been found, but the forest seemed to have swallowed both Daniel and the dog. There were no signs of a struggle, nor evidence that they had been attacked by animals. Theories abounded. Some believe he fell into a ravine or was swept away by a stream hidden beneath melting snow. Others think he might have encountered someone who did not want to be found. There are even those who speak of something more unusual. Local hunters tell stories of dead areas in the woods where compasses fail and sound disappears, as if space itself folds in on itself. Coincidence or not, some of these accounts point to locations near where Daniel vanished. His disappearance earned the grim nickname Dog Gone among residents, because the dog was never found either. For many, the most disturbing part is precisely that. A dog trained to survive in the wild with a sharp sense of smell should not simply vanish without a trace. Years passed. The family gave up the search, but locals and park rangers still remember the case well. And whenever a visitor mentions Hell-Roaring Creek, someone inevitably says, "You'd better not stray from the trail," because in that forgotten part of the park, 2 companions went in and never returned, and they would not be the last. A few years later, another disappearance would draw attention. This time, a man whose car was found intact, with all his belongings, right in the heart of Yellowstone. The disappearance of Stuart Isaac, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, September 26, 2010. In late September of 2010, 48-year-old Stuart Isaac left Burtonsville, Maryland, for a long cross-country road trip. His final destination was Yellowstone, a dream he had nurtured for years. There are no records indicating that he informed friends or family about changes to his itinerary, and all signs pointed to him heading straight for the park. On September 26th, visitors found a black 2009 Lexus IS 250 parked on the shoulder of Craig Pass, a mountain road just over 8 miles from the Old Faithful geyser. The car was unlocked. Inside were his wallet, cell phone, clothes, maps, and even unopened bottles of water. There were no signs of forced entry or any indication of a struggle. It was as if the driver had stepped out for a few minutes and simply never returned. Craig Pass, though accessible, is surrounded by dense forest and steep slopes. In the weeks that followed, search teams combed the area using helicopters, drones, and tracking dogs. No clues, no footprints, no discarded belongings, no traces indicating where Stuart might have gone. The investigation produced a few hypotheses. One suggested he had left to explore the area and become lost, eventually succumbing to a fall or to nighttime cold exposure. Another, more unsettling, involved an unexpected encounter with someone passing through the region. But with no physical evidence, all theories remained speculation. The detail that most troubled investigators was the scene inside the car. Experts in missing person cases say that in voluntary disappearances, there are usually telltale signs: withdrawn cash, taken documents, intentionally switched off devices. In Stuart's case, everything was there, and untouched. Family members described Isaac as an organized, calm man who loved nature. He had no history of severe mental illness or risky behavior, and yet he vanished in broad daylight, in an area visited by thousands of tourists each year. Over time, Craig Pass developed a quiet reputation among guides and rangers. Some avoid stopping in that area, especially in the late afternoon when fog begins to blanket the road and the trees seem to draw closer. "It's a beautiful place, but it feels like it's watching you," a park ranger remarked years later. And for those who know the story, the sight of an abandoned car with everything inside always raises the same question. If Stuart did not leave by choice, what took him from there? A question that would echo again just over a decade later, when another experienced visitor disappeared in the same park, leaving behind not a car, but a body, and a brother still alive in the midst of despair. The disappearance of Kim Crumbbo, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, September 19th, 2021. In September of 2021, two brothers set out on a canoe trip deep into Yellowstone's wilderness. They were veterans of the outdoors. 74-year-old Kim Crumbbo, a former Navy SEAL and renowned conservationist, and his half-brother, 67-year-old Mark O'Neill. Their route would take them through the remote Shoshone Lake, one of the most isolated spots in the park. The plan was to camp for 4 nights and return on the 19th. They never came back. Search operations began as soon as the family raised the alarm. A few days later, Mark's body was found on the lake's shore. The autopsy revealed death by hypothermia, a slow end typical of those facing icy water, biting wind, and nights without shelter. Nearby lay part of their camping gear, clothing, and the overturned canoe. But of Kim there was no sign. The search was massive: helicopters, sonar-equipped boats, divers, ground teams, and tracking dogs. The cold, deep waters of Shoshone made everything harder, and the surrounding terrain, dense forest, slippery rocks, and mud, turned each step into a risk. Even so, many believed that a man with Crumbbo's background could survive, but days went by, and nothing. The case carried an extra weight of mystery because of who Kim was. He had decades of experience in extreme environments, knew survival techniques, and could navigate any kind of terrain. Close friends said that if he were alive, he would have found a way to signal his position. The absence of any clue fueled speculation. He might have drowned, been swept into a more remote part of the lake, or something worse, beyond the reach of search teams. The park found no signs of foul play. Officially, it was classified as a missing person case. But for those who followed it closely, it felt as though pieces of the puzzle were missing. The image of the overturned canoe, Mark's body, and the void where Kim should have been left a silent echo. Some veteran rangers say that Shoshone keeps what falls into it. Its cold waters preserve, but its vastness conceals. And sometimes the lake simply does not give back. Today, the case remains open. The family keeps Kim's memory alive, not just as the victim of an accident, but as someone whose story is forever entwined with Yellowstone's secrets. And if, for Shoshone, Kim's body was never returned, the park also holds another story. This time, not about a war veteran, but about a boy whose final hours were carried away by the freezing current of the Yellowstone River. The disappearance of Luke Adam Sandberg, Yellowstone National Park, Montana, June 24, 2005. It was a sunny, warm day by Yellowstone standards when 13-year-old Luke Adam Sandberg was attending a campout with his Boy Scout troop. The group consisted of 3 adults and 6 boys, camping about 6 miles north of Gardiner on the park's northern boundary. The plan was simple: explore the area, learn survival skills, and of course have fun. But shortly after lunch, everything changed. As Luke approached the bank of the Yellowstone River, he slipped on a patch of wet rocks and fell into the water. Witnesses said it happened too quickly for anyone to grab him. The stretch where the accident occurred is known for its treacherous current, especially in late June, when snowmelt from the mountains feeds the river at full force. Panic set in immediately. The adults tried to enter the water, but were forced to retreat in the face of the swift current. Within minutes, the boy was out of sight. Search teams were called in the same day. Helicopters flew over the river, divers combed strategic areas, and patrols searched along the banks. 2 days later, a small discovery brought a brief flicker of hope. A pair of shoes, identified as Luke's, found about 5 miles downstream. But of the boy himself, there was no sign. The Yellowstone's frigid waters are deadly. Beyond the current, there are submerged rocks, trapped logs, and whirlpools that pull anything down to the bottom. Experts explain that in such spots, a body can remain trapped for weeks, or even never be recovered. The case, officially classified as an accidental drowning, carries a deep emotional weight. Luke was described as curious, full of energy, and quick to smile. His family, friends, and fellow scouts remember the day when fun turned to tragedy. Some say that certain stretches of the Yellowstone River seem to swallow and keep whatever they take. Local fishermen tell stories of strange tugs on their lines, as if something down there does not want to be disturbed. Luke's disappearance is a painful reminder that in Yellowstone, beauty and danger walk side by side, and that a single misstep can be final. But for those who think only the forces of nature claim lives in the park, there are cases that show the opposite: disappearances in which the environment explains nothing, and where no trace, not even a shoe, is ever found. The disappearance of Bruce Pike, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, August 2006. Little is known with certainty about the final days of 47-year-old Bruce Pike. He was no inexperienced tourist. He knew the trails, could navigate remote areas, and had visited Yellowstone before. In August of 2006, he set out to explore the wilderness around Shoshone Lake, an isolated spot surrounded by miles of dense forest and completely inaccessible by road. Witnesses reported seeing him near the lake's eastern shore, carrying a backpack and basic camping gear. It was early afternoon, and the weather was stable, with partly cloudy skies. After that, nothing. When Bruce failed to return on the agreed date, authorities launched a search. Shoshone Lake is treacherous not only for its vastness, but also for its isolation. Any rescue effort requires days of hiking or the use of boats, and weather can shift in minutes. Teams covered dozens of miles of trails and scoured the lakeshore. Helicopters flew over key areas, but no trace was found. No tent, clothing, gear, or campsite. It was as if Bruce had vanished into thin air. The lack of concrete evidence led to several theories. One suggested that he might have attempted to cross part of the lake in an improvised vessel and drowned, his body sinking into the deepest sections. Another proposed that he had followed a barely visible trail, becoming trapped in inaccessible terrain. Some even speculated about an unexpected encounter with predators or foul play, though nothing officially supported that possibility. What is most unsettling is that in most disappearances in the region, something remains: a scrap of clothing, a backpack, footprints. But in Bruce's case, nothing was ever found, not even years later. To some park rangers, Shoshone holds stories that never make it into official reports. There are accounts of strange sounds in the forest, like footsteps matching those of hikers, or voices that seem to call a person's name. Skeptics attribute these to the wind, the natural acoustics of the region, and the psychological effects of isolation. But those who have stood at the lake's edge at nightfall swear that something is watching and waiting. The case of Bruce Pike remains unanswered, and, as if fate wanted to reinforce Yellowstone's dark reputation, the next disappearance would bring even more disturbing elements. A solitary climb, the highest point in the park, and a mysterious note left at the summit. The disappearance of Austin King, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, September 17, 2024. Austin King, 22 years old, left Winona, Minnesota, for the most ambitious challenge of his life. Reaching Eagle Peak, the highest point in Yellowstone. The trail is not for beginners. It demands physical endurance, terrain reading skills, and resilience against the mountain's unpredictable weather. Austin, accustomed to long-distance hikes, set out alone. On the morning of September 17th, he contacted family and friends, describing the scene at the summit. Rain, dense fog, hail, and wind gusts strong enough to knock a man off balance. Despite the conditions, he seemed determined to complete the climb. It was the last time anyone heard his voice. Days later, search teams found a handwritten note at the top of Eagle Peak. Authorities never released its full contents, but unofficial descriptions say it contained disjointed phrases, as if written hastily and under extreme stress. Next to the note, boot prints led toward the edge of a cliff, but the absence of a body, equipment, or any other belongings prevented definitive conclusions. The search efforts were extensive. Helicopters flew over the area. Teams climbed alternative routes. Drones scanned crevices and slopes. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing, not a trace of a campsite. The unstable weather, with sudden storms and thick fog, forced search suspensions multiple times, increasing the likelihood that crucial evidence was covered or destroyed. Eagle Peak carries a quiet reputation among climbers. It is not only the altitude, it is the sense of absolute isolation. There are stretches where the wind drowns out all sound, and visibility drops to just a few meters. Veteran guides say that on certain days, it feels as though the peak does not want visitors. For Austin's family, the absence of answers is the most painful blow. The hope of finding him alive mingles with the need to understand what happened that day. Did he fall swept away by extreme winds? Did he lose his bearings in the fog and follow a path with no return? Or did the note left at the summit point to something more unusual? The case remains open, another among the many mysteries Yellowstone harbors, a park where nature is both beautiful and deadly, and where the missing do not always leave clues. And so, from the Hell-Roaring Creek Trail to the park's highest peak, 6 stories prove that in Yellowstone, the unknown is not only in the legends, it is in the very land itself, waiting for the next name to be etched onto the endless list of mysteries. In Yellowstone, each disappearance leaves more questions than answers. Among mountains, rivers, and trails, there are stories that will never be closed. And perhaps that is the most frightening part.